that I'm going to talk about is this whole concept of leadership as I learned it from my mother. Too many people confuse leadership with authority and power or positions. And therefore, often mothers are not considered to be leaders. Yet the basic essence of leadership is very simple. The basic essence of leadership is giving people knowledge to succeed in doing something, to reach an objective. I'll give you a very simple example. I need to go to the bathroom of my child who goes to an elementary school. So I ask the child, honey, where is the bathroom? And the child takes me to the bathroom. Is that an act of leadership? It should be. Yet, if you look at the leadership literature, they're talking about transformational leadership. They're talking about this kind of leadership, that kind of leadership. And they're even talking about people needing to have charisma to be a leader. If you look at the leadership books that are taught in MBA schools, you have to have these 20 different characteristics in order to be a leader. You have to be on a pedestal, and you have to have these positions of power and influence so that you can influence people into doing things. Well, that's all nonsense. Charisma isn't something that I'm born with. Charisma only happens when people are drawn to me for whatever reason that may be. And it could be even as simple thing as a personal brand. It could be that. So what I'm going to share are very simple things that I think each of us need to recognize. First, that mothers are leaders, and if you really want to go back to the essence of leadership, to me that's motherhood, and I want to tie it to the story of my mother from whom I learned leadership. This is my mom, an absolutely gorgeous young lady when she was in her prime. I unfortunately was born late. I was almost the second last child. I was actually an accident. I was not supposed to be born. So here I am, introducing my mom. She was born during the British era, at a time when women's education was not allowed. Her father did not believe in women's education. And so therefore, her father never sent her to school. Yet, she learned to read, write, and speak in English, Bangla, and Urdu, 3 languages, without ever formally going to school. She also became a board-certified homeopathic doctor. Then, she earned a certificate in embroidery from the Singer Company. Singer Company is the company that manufactures these sewing machines. Well, even in Bangladesh or India, those machines were available. And then, with her own money, she bought a 3-unit house and rented out the 2 units. So she was business-minded and used that to essentially raise several children, including my younger brother and I, because by the time we were starting to grow up, my parents split up when I was in the 7th grade. So that also gave me the opportunity to learn and apply some of the lessons that she had done. So I'm going to share some of that with you. She lived to be about 80 years old, which in Bangladesh is pretty good. And the most amazing thing about her was, as one of the speakers mentioned, this power of positive thinking. she was always optimistic. It didn't matter what the problems were, she was always optimistic. She always thought positively, as you urged us to do that. So here are some of the key leadership lessons that I learned. The very first thing, every one of you can do this, is don't focus on the problem. Focus on the solution. And the solution is usually within our control. So, ideal thing is never to focus on things that I cannot control. Because the moment I do that, guess what happens? I'm going to become paralyzed. It's going to be a hopeless situation. I'm going to be frustrated. So if I focus on just the things that I can control, then I can be successful. So here's what my mom did. Her father won't send her to school. One of the lucky environments, she was living in an extended family. Her grandfather had this big mansion and everybody was living under that same roof. So luckily she had uncles who were about 4 years older than her. And she also had a younger brother. The younger brother and the uncle was being sent to school. So what did she do? She decided to negotiate with them. These are things that she can control. She decided to negotiate. Hey, if I polish your shoes and if I wash your shirt and iron your shirt, will you teach me what you learned in school? I want you to teach me everything that you learned in school. Now the beautiful thing about this is this generational thinking, right? The uncle and the brother, they are of course not in that older generation where women's education is forbidden or not allowed or a crazy idea. They did not really agree with this concept of my mom not being able to go to school, and she was just as smart as anybody else and probably smarter actually. So they agreed. And that is how she's learned the 3 languages. English, Bangla, and Urdu. Everything that her uncle and brother learned, younger brother, learned in school, she was able to learn. And she did their chores for them. And that is how she did it. Similarly, she taught us never to focus on our problems. We were not very rich. I just had, I think, 2 pairs of pants and 2 shirts for going to school. But guess what? Those shirts were always ironed, starched beautifully, and they looked crisp. So nobody, if we went to school in those outfits, nobody would ever know whether we were rich or poor, because it was how we carried ourselves. That is something we could control. We could not control the fact that we could only afford 2 pairs of pants or 2 shirts, but we could control how they looked and how we carried ourselves. So we carried ourselves with pride. And that was the amazing thing. We actually went, because our priorities were very different. Her priority was very different. She wanted to make sure that her children would never suffer the fate that she suffered. So she sent me to the best school that she could afford at the age of 2.5. I learned English, Bangla, and Urdu at the age of 2.5. And that is why, if you listen to me, I talk English just like any native speaking English person. And yes, I had an accent. My accent was worse before I came to America, but I worked on that. And those are things she also taught us, that we can change, we can learn. Accents we can get rid of to the extent possible. So one of the things was that I was dreaming to come to study in America. And I was wondering, how is that going to be possible? We can only afford 2 shirts and 2 pants and not much money. And yet, I want to go to America to study. That was something that my mom also wanted to be possible for me. So that she gave us all the opportunities. She basically said, don't worry about something 20 years from now. Focus on the today. What can you do today? And she also talked about that in every adversity, there is an opportunity. So she basically said, look, yeah, my parents are separated, divorced from when I was in the 7th grade. So she basically called the family together and said, look, each of you actually have an ability to earn a living, to do something that you might be able to sell. So just think about creativity. So one of the things that, and she also urged to help us to help each other. So my oldest brother, he knew that one of the things that I could do is I could paint and I could write poetry. So my oldest brother commissioned me to make a wedding card for one of his friends who was getting married. And he said, I'm going to give you 5 takas for that. It's like, wow, this is pretty good. So yes, I made one of the best possible cards with a beautiful painting and a nice message. This was 1968. This is not the age of Hallmark or electronic greeting cards or none of that. So when my brother took that to the wedding, it was basically amazing. He says, wow, where did you get this card? Can I buy this card somewhere? No, my brother made it. So guess what? That was the beginning of my first business. Making greeting cards for people, birthday cards, wedding cards, selling them for 5 takas. And I was like, wow, I'm in 7th grade and I'm already making money like this. 10th grade, I started teaching English to other students. Because I was good in that language and there was a lot of people that weren't so good in language, I started to teach. I would go to people's homes and teach their kids English. Well, what did that lead to? That led to a teaching job at an international school, which eventually led me to making so much money that I could afford the airfare to America. The other thing she taught us is the power of values. She said, values define who you are. There are certain things should be so near and dear to who you are, they are not worth sacrificing. And one of them is integrity. Because if you believe in a certain set of values, you will find that there are people all over the world who have the same values. And we really found that because we had friends who practiced different religion, different culture, but because of our value basis, the basis of friendship was in the value, we could form deep bonds. The other thing she taught us is acceptance of whoever it is, whatever. They don't need to be the same as us. They don't need to look like us. And so we were taught equality of men and women, equality of all religions, equality of all people of all skin color, because after the skin is torn off, it's all red blood inside anyway. And that was something we learned. We also learned, don't get too hung up on religion. Because if you truly follow any religion, all religions teach the same thing. They teach the same values. There is no religion that actually tells you to do wrong things. And if there are religions that people are interpreting that makes them do the wrong thing, then they are misinterpreting and misapplying the religion for other political purposes, purposes of power, whatever it is. Because religion can be used as a weapon. We've seen that happen all the time. The other thing is that she needed to know who we are mixing with. It was very important because you will see many families, the friends are not really allowed in the house. Especially in our culture, friends of a different gender was not really allowed in the house. So I'm a young boy growing up. In many other families, girls would not be welcome. But that was not true in our house. In our house, friends were friends, whether you were man, women, boy, girl, it did not matter. The main reason was, it was her wisdom. Not only do we need to learn to deal with everybody and treat everybody equally, because the thing is what? Familiarity. Once we are familiar with each other, then that whole concept of, say, exploiting somebody doesn't happen. It's when we can make the other out of somebody, is when we can think about exploiting somebody. But if somebody is becoming our friend, normally we would not think about exploiting that person. And so we grew up with this diverse thing, and the best part was my mom knew who we were mixing with, because she wanted to make sure that we were mixing with good kids. Didn't matter what their gender was, didn't matter what their economic condition was, but they were good kids, good values. That was important. And she actually spent a lot of time learning about my friends. Then, the power of integrity. I'm going to share a story where this was such an early lesson. I was in the 4th grade, and one of the things that I had already earned a reputation by the 4th grade, that Mansur does not lie. That was well known. So what happened was, in the 4th grade, I had a brand new teacher who was hired, and this teacher, I would say, was probably a sadist, because what she would do is every time anybody did anything, even answered a question wrong, she would hit you. And she would hit the boys with the sharp side of the ruler, and she would hit the girls with the flat side of the ruler. So one day, she asked a question, I raised my hand, I was one of those active kids, wanted to learn, so my answer was wrong. And she hit me. She hit me on my right hand, and that caused some problems with my eating. So my mom noticed it, and she wondered what happened. Once she learned, she said, I'm gonna go talk to your principal. So she talked to the principal. The principal said, okay, I'm gonna call the teacher into the classroom. So the principal called the teacher into the classroom and asked the teacher, what happened? Did you hit the child? Did you hit Mansur? And she said, yes. Why did you hit the child? She said, because he was being naughty in class. Okay, so principal asked me once again, Mansur, why did she hit you? I told the truth in front of the teacher. That is what I did. The teacher immediately said, no, he's lying, this is not true, etc., etc. The principal fired the teacher on the spot. And she said, you're hereby terminated not for hitting the child, but for lying, because you are not a good example that I want to hold up in my classrooms. Mansur already has a reputation for never lying, and I know that he would not lie like this in front of his mother, in front of his teacher, in front of me. And so therefore, you are hereby terminated for lying. Where a child is speaking the truth, but you, who are supposed to be a role model, is not. To me, at 4th grade, that was a powerful lesson about the power of integrity and the power of having a reputation of integrity, because I think it is important. So that was one of the things that I carried to my whole concept of leadership also, because I'm a big believer in what is called ethical leadership. Ethical leadership is very simple. It is the principle of sharing the fruits of success with the people who helped you produce it. And that, to me, is the essence of capitalism. It is the essence of cybersecurity leadership. It is the essence that made America the greatest country in the world. The other thing is that she taught us that there are no gender-specific roles. You will see in many families, women are supposed to do the cleaning, the cooking, and everything. And the man just gets to enjoy. Sit in front of the TV and maybe smoke a cigar or whatever, but there are these gender-specific roles. She taught us, no, that is nonsense. There are no gender-specific roles because everybody's capable of doing everything. As a matter of fact, you should, because you might need it for survival. And so sure enough, when we were kids, she taught us to roll bread, cook, make tea, serve guests, and she also taught that humility. So even though we had supposedly servants and so on and so forth, that people who could do the serving, no, she taught us, she herself would sometimes bring out the meal, because she taught us that there is no specific role that you should be unwilling to do. So she taught us to serve guests. And even though there were some things that a woman was so-called not supposed to be doing in a male-dominated society, she did not listen to any of that. As a matter of fact, here's the funniest thing. In some religious cultures, a woman cannot lead a prayer. She refused to accept that because why? So she actually led prayers also. She taught that that is perfectly okay, and it should be. Why should it not be okay for a woman to lead a prayer? I mean, what religion could it be where a woman cannot lead a prayer? God doesn't see a man and a woman separately, differently, or shouldn't be. Here you see, here's a woman in Bangladesh, which is where this was, carrying a child, doing this work, supposedly a man's work. But the other thing that she taught us is it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you do. If people give you something to do, it is completely unethical not to do it properly, not to do it to the best of your ability. So if somebody gives you something to do, particularly if you're accepting money for that task, you must do it to the best of your ability. And so here is the most amazing thing. This is another story, 5th grade. I'm in 5th grade, and my school is having a play. Well, it is The Sleeping Beauty. Of course, I want one of the prime roles. I want the role of the king or the prince or something. But I didn't get that. I got a very tiny role that would appear in only 2 scenes, and I would have 1 line to say. So I came home crying. And I was very disappointed. And I told my mom, I wanted to have a better role. But then she said, look, every role is important. Even the earthworm has an important function. And your significance is not determined by the amount of time on stage. Each of us, everybody in society, have a role to play. And it is important that whatever role is assigned to us, we play that to the best of our ability. So I took that to heart, and I said, okay, that makes sense. I got that 1 line to say and 2 scenes to appear in. I am going to try to do the best possible in that role. Much to my amazement, I received the 3rd prize in acting in that play. Even though I had 1 line to say and 2 scenes to appear in, because I honestly took it to heart and I did the best possible in those 2 scenes. Literally, I would say the 2 scenes combined was maybe 2 minutes of appearance on stage, and that 1 line was maybe 10 seconds long. But I did it with such heart and feeling that it actually moved the judges. They were not supposed to give the 3rd prize. They were only supposed to give 1st and 2nd, but they said, this young kid did such a great job. We have to give a 3rd prize. So they gave us me a prize. Again, validation that no matter what role you're assigned, if you do it properly, if you do it best, you can be rewarded. Then she talked to us about finding ourselves. How do we find ourselves? Everybody has trouble finding themselves. you will never know what you're good at unless you try 100 different things. And she also taught us that if you try 10 different things, even if you're successful in 2 or 3 of them, that success will make you so happy, inspire you so much, that you'll be able to do other things. Because as human beings, what happens when we're disappointed, when we fail at anything? All kinds of negative chemicals flow through our body. Whereas when we have success, that applause or whatever, what does that do? Inspire. Good chemicals. We are a chemical human being. At the end of the day, we're nothing more than a glob of chemicals. And depending on what chemical is flowing in our body, that's how our brains will think. So just because we might be successful in 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 10 things that we do, that could give us amazing inspiration to build upon that success and do amazing things. But it will also help us figure out what we could do. So early on, you saw that there is this guitar. Well, actually, I do play the guitar. I learned to play the guitar and sing. Amazingly enough, it was that talent that got me my very first full-time job. Because even in trying to get the job, when I went for the job interview, I had this long hair, sideburns. I was 17 years old. And I wanted a full-time job as a teacher in 1st grade, 3rd grade, and 5th grade. And the principal took one look at me and says, "Nah." But my teacher who had taken me because he knew that I needed the job, he said, but principal, but sister, he has other talents also. What other talents does he have? Oh, he can play the guitar and he can sing. So now the principal asked me, well, can you teach young children how to play the guitar and sing? I said, sister, I've never done it, but I'm willing to try. So again, I was trying to be honest. She hired me on the spot. So that's how I got the job as an English teacher at Green Herald International School, which is what eventually led my ability to make the money to come to America. Okay? So that was a very interesting lesson because I had experimented with a whole bunch of things. Now, I was never very good at singing or playing the guitar, but it was something that also allowed me to make friends and relate to people. I've spoken on poetry, I've spoken on literature, so there's a whole bunch of things that I've spoken on. Here I am talking about women's leadership, but my real field is supposed to be cybersecurity leadership. Well, it's because of that diverse interest in not only the fields, but also people. I genuinely love everybody with passion, because it just amazes me that people of passion that draw you to them and also inspire you to learn things that you would never have thought about. And so I've been able to make great friends here at Eric's conferences with lots of people that I would normally never meet if I was just going to cybersecurity conferences. That would be impossible. So I love these conferences for that particular reason. So I want to leave you with this simple message that let's make sure that all of us embrace mothers as natural leaders, because it is that person who first gives us the leadership lessons. Because a typical mother is simply focusing on the success of her children. She's not focusing on anything else. That success of the child eventually determines her own success as a mother. So let's also view leaders as the simple concept that leaders inspire others to succeed. And so that has been my motto in life also. I simply help people succeed. That is my personal mission in life. Right now, I teach cybersecurity leadership, business leadership, organizational leadership through digital strategy to literally thousands of students. I am the program chair at the Graduate Cybersecurity Technology Program at University of Maryland University College, which right now has the world's largest cybersecurity education program with 12,000 students worldwide. Anybody from anywhere in the world can study in our curriculum. So I am actually applying this concepts also. The leadership concepts that I just shared with you, these are concepts that are shared in our classrooms. Our students have to go through this. They have to understand that leadership isn't about you. Leadership is about other people. Leaders develop other people. And in doing that, they solve big problems. They also transfer the good values. So if I have a good value and I develop a culture, how can I develop the culture? By transferring those good values to others. My mom did that to me. And leaders don't focus on the problem, they focus on the solution. They solve the problem. So I thank you very much, and I want to leave you with this one line from Mother Teresa, which is that I can do things you cannot, and you can do things that I cannot, and together we can do great things. Thank you very much.